Welcome back to EtherLink AI Insights. I'm Alex, and today we're diving into something that's reshaping how enterprises actually work: agentic AI systems and the governance frameworks that make them trustworthy. We're talking about autonomous agents handling real workflows, not just chatbots answering questions. My co-host Sam is here to break down what this means for enterprises, especially those navigating EU compliance. Sam, why is 2026 such a pivotal year for this shift?
Great question, Alex. The numbers tell the story. 74% of enterprises are planning to deploy autonomous or semi-autonomous AI agents by 2026. We're not talking pilot projects anymore. These agents will be coordinating shipments, approving workflows, executing multi-step processes with minimal human intervention. That's a fundamental change from the chatbot era, and it creates real governance challenges.
So when you say minimal human intervention, what does that actually look like in practice? I imagine in something like Rotterdam's logistics sector, which apparently is becoming a hub for this, the stakes are pretty high.
Exactly. In Rotterdam's port operations, you've got agents coordinating shipment schedules across multiple carriers and customs systems. The agent isn't asking for permission every single time. It escalates only when something actually requires human judgment. That autonomy is powerful, but it demands transparency and clear audit trails. And here's the kicker. Only 31% of enterprises have implemented governance frameworks before deploying agents. That's the gap we need to close.
That's a striking statistic. 31%. So enterprises are essentially playing with fire here, building autonomous systems without the guardrails in place. What's driving that gap? Is it just speed to market thinking?
It's partly that, but it's also complexity and unclear ownership. Agentic systems require cross-functional thinking. You need legal, operations, technical teams all aligned on what the agent can do, when it escalates, and how it's audited. Many enterprises haven't figured out who owns that accountability. Add EU AI Act compliance on top, and you get hesitation. But that hesitation is actually expensive if you deploy first and govern later.
Let's talk about that EU AI Act angle because it seems like that's the regulatory forcing function here. How does the Act actually classify these agents?
The EU AI Act uses a risk-tiered approach: prohibited, high risk, and general purpose. Autonomous agents fall into high risk when they make or influence decisions affecting individuals, think hiring, credit decisions, or when they operate in critical infrastructure like transport or healthcare. A logistics agent processing shipment delays or customs holds? That's high risk. So you need documented risk assessments, human oversight mechanisms, transparency logs, the whole governance architecture.
So it's not just, here's your agent, go execute. There's actual documentation and testing required up front. What does that governance architecture actually include? Who needs to be involved?
You need a cross-functional governance board. Compliance and legal teams map each agent to its risk tier and document data handling. Risk and operations define escalation rules. When does the agent hand off to a human? Technical teams implement transparency logging so every decision is auditable. You're essentially building a decision governance layer, not just a technical layer.
That sounds comprehensive, but also resource-intensive. For mid-market enterprises, how do they actually start? What's the minimal viable governance structure?
Start with 3 things. First, a risk classification. What decisions does your agent make and how risky are they? Second, escalation rules. Define the conditions where humans must review. Third, an audit trail. Log agent actions, reasoning, and outcomes. You don't need perfect governance day one, but you need intentional governance before deployment. Rotterdam enterprises are learning this the hard way. Early movers that got the framework right are scaling faster than those playing catch-up.
You mentioned MCP orchestration in the title. What's that? And why does it matter for enterprise agents?
MCP, Model Context Protocol, is essentially a standard for how agents connect to and use external tools and systems. Instead of hard-coding integrations, MCP lets you plug tools in modularly. That matters for governance because you can define permissions, audit logs, and constraints at the tool level. If your agent can access your financial system, customs database, and email, MCP lets you control exactly what the agent can do in each one.
So it's like a controlled interface layer that makes governance actually enforceable. That makes sense. What about the evaluation piece? How do enterprises know their agents are actually working reliably before they go live?
AI agent evaluation is critical and often overlooked. You need to test across multiple scenarios. Does the agent make consistent decisions? Does it handle edge cases without escalating unnecessarily? Does it produce biased outcomes? And crucially, how does it perform on real-world data and workflows? Many enterprises do static testing in sandbox environments, but then the agent hits production workflows and surprises them. You need red team scenarios, performance baselines, and ongoing monitoring.
Red teaming an AI agent. That's interesting. Are we talking about trying to break it intentionally?
Exactly. Try to get it to make bad decisions, bypass guardrails, escalate when it shouldn't. In a shipping context, what happens if the agent receives conflicting instructions from two carriers? Does it audit that decision? Can it be tricked into overriding cost constraints? These aren't hypothetical risks. They're real threats in production. The enterprises doing this well are documenting those failure modes and building constraints around them.
So governance isn't just about compliance. It's actually about building more reliable systems. That's a really important point. Let's talk about the maturity model for agent deployment. The article mentions 2026 production deployment. What does the roadmap actually look like for enterprises starting now?
There's an AI maturity model emerging. Stage 1 is pilot, small-scope agents with heavy human oversight. Stage 2 is production light, agents handling routine decisions with clear escalation paths. Stage 3 is autonomous with guardrails, agents operating independently, but within defined constraints and budgets. By 2026, the leaders will be at Stage 3. But getting there requires intentional progression, not rushing to autonomy.
How long does that progression typically take?
6 to 12 months if you're intentional about governance. But if you skip steps or build governance reactively, you're looking at costly rework. Rotterdam enterprises that started governance planning in 2024 are positioned to hit production-grade deployment in 2026. Those starting now have a narrower window, but it's still doable if they move quickly on framework design.
What's the biggest tactical mistake you're seeing enterprises make as they build these systems?
Unclear ownership and escalation logic. They build a smart agent but can't articulate who's accountable if something goes wrong or what conditions trigger human review. That ambiguity is dangerous. I'd also say underestimating the audit trail requirement. Transparency isn't a nice-to-have, it's fundamental to trust and compliance. And finally, testing in isolation without real-world data and workflows. Your agent might be brilliant in a sandbox and awful in production.
Those feel like preventable mistakes if you're thinking about governance early. What does success actually look like? How do you know your agentic system is working?
You're hitting your operational targets: faster processing, fewer escalations for routine decisions, lower error rates. But equally important, you're auditable, compliant, and transparent. You can pull a decision log from 6 months ago and explain every choice the agent made. Your humans trust the system because they understand it, and you're not facing regulatory pushback. That's the combined win.
That's a really balanced way to think about it. It's not just speed or just compliance, it's both working together. For listeners who are just starting to explore agentic AI for their enterprise workflows, what's the first concrete step?
Map your use cases to EU AI Act risk tiers. What decisions will your agents make? How risky are they? Then design governance around that risk level. Don't build the system first and bolt on governance later. It costs more and creates gaps. Start with a simple governance charter. Who owns this agent? What can it do? When does it escalate? How is it audited? That's your foundation.
Clear, actionable, and compliance first. Sam, thanks for breaking this down. There's clearly a lot of nuance in moving from chat interfaces to genuinely autonomous workflows. Listeners, if you want to dive deeper into the governance frameworks, MCP orchestration patterns, and the full Rotterdam case study, head to etherlink AI and check out the full article. We'll link it in the show notes. Until next time, I'm Alex, and this has been EtherLink AI Insights.
Thanks for having me. And remember, governance-first architecture isn't slowing you down. It's the only way to actually scale.